Hello everyone, thank you very much for coming and listening to the recording. My name is Bettina Coleman-Schoels and I'm here to present my thesis with the title of The Inner Life of a Born Global Family Firm, a longitudinal study of the effects of organizational change on internal social capital. This is for the presentation is for the London Met Staff Student Summer Conference 2024. The overview of the presentation is I want to talk about the background to the study and provide you with an insight of the relevant literature and my findings. And then if there are any questions, comments or feedback, please let me know. So overall, the study itself was a longitudinal case study that was on the internationalization of a family firm. And the data collection took place between 2018 and 2021. So it took, I've analyzed 3 years of data. The organization is called APV and it is an Austrian manufacturer of agricultural machinery. They have around 160 employees and they are trading globally. So you can see the world map on the right hand side with places where they're actually trading. And at the time of the study, they had subsidiaries in Russia, USA, Germany and Poland. The subsidiaries in China and Turkey were there at the beginning of the study, and then they were closed whilst the study took place. The study itself actually focused mainly on the internal social capital, which was also broken down into family social capital and non-family social capital. The literature itself shows that family firms are of great interest and have been for the last 80-90 years. And one of the reasons why they're of great interest is that they outperform non-family firms. And researchers wanted to find out what it is that actually makes family firms different. So some of the suggestions were that closer, firm and more intense interpersonal relationships are being formed in these organizations and lived. And that's within the family, but also between family and non-family members, and also within non-family members themselves. The family firms also thrive on these connections, so this is one of the big parts. And it's also suggested that family firms have non-economic goals that they're pursuing, which include sustainability and employment. The other focus is on social capital, which is a capital to draw upon and benefit from relationships that enable actions, generate value, or is also defined as the goodwill and resources made available via a reciprocal trusting relationship. And this is one of the big concepts in family firm research that is suggested as to why family firms are actually outperforming non-family firms. This social capital is very valuable, and it provides the competitive advantage, but at the same time it is costly to imitate, although some big companies are actually trying to imitate those and are not as successful in doing so as the natural. So the literature review also suggests that interrelationships between family and non-family members create extraordinary motivations and bonds of loyalty to the firm, and it increases trust and encourages the creation and maintenance of social capital. So in order to understand social capital in family firms more, if internal social capital is broken down into family social capital and non-family social capital. And again, there are 3 dimensions that are often measured in other studies that are in both of these social capitals, and they are considered to be cognitive, structural and relational. Cognitive suggests that they have a shared purpose, a meaning, vision, values and a sense of belonging. Structural are the number of connections that staff members and family members have, the hierarchical structure of the organization and the interactions they have. And then that leads on to the relational dimension, which talks about trust, obligation, commitment, and relying on others. And these 3 dimensions are very often in other studies measured on with quantitative measures, factors, i.e. questionnaires, surveys. But in my study, I'm actually using a qualitative research methodology. And yes, the basis of creating monitoring internal social capital is communication. So communication is one of the vital areas of interest as well. So my study looked at the case study. So the case was the organization itself, and I collected primary qualitative data in conducting 30 semi-structured interviews. These interviews were between 45 and 90 minutes long, and some people were interviewed 4 times, some people were only interviewed once. It depended on the availability and the importance of the individual members. So the interviews were held in summer 2018, then winter 2018, summer 2019, and summer 2021. I also analyzed 50 newsletters. So the organization actually, when I first started, introduced newsletters, quarterly newsletters, and I analyzed all of those that came out. I also looked at other internal data, including 2 surveys that were also designed by the organization with the help of outside consultants, and that were designed in the last 2 periods, so in summer 2029 and summer 2021. And I also used a personal research journal to keep track of my thinking and of my involvements and of observations. And I also looked at meetings. I was part of a few meetings, and I kept notes and analyzed the data. I used thematic analysis and visualization method to actually try and combine all the data that I had collected, to keep track of it and to make sense of it. So the relevance of a case study is sometimes questioned, and I just want to very briefly mention Fliffbjerg and his suggestion that actually case studies are very important, as we very often learn from contexts, depending experiences, and social sciences are very different from natural sciences, and therefore it's very important for us to actually look and learn from case studies, because they're not there to prove something or but rather to learn something new. And even atypical and extreme cases are very important and very relevant and reveal a lot of information, so provide a rich data set for us to understand the topic. And biases are possible, so therefore increased awareness and conscientious acknowledgement is important in case studies. So these are the results. What happened in the case study was that there was a critical incident just at the beginning of my data collection that led to a major organizational change process. And by collecting the data, I've noticed that the social capital before the organizational change process was very different to after. And so therefore I analyzed the data, and I've looked into the 3 dimensions of internal social capital. As you can see on the left-hand side, cognitive, structural, and relational. And I've separated the family and the non-family dimensions. So in the family, before the organizational change process, the family actually saw themselves as custodian, and they were there to care and support all employees. They were there to be fair and supportive of staff. They looked at individuals in a holistic view. The goal was for the organization to be beneficial to all, and they wanted to expand. Their perspective was entrepreneurial and opportunistic, and the organization was seen as an organism that would just organically grow. Structurally, they had many social interactions, and they were very supportive of informal social interactions. So they organized many and sponsored many informal social interactions between members, staff members, and themselves. So the relationship was very informal. They had a good relationship with the staff, and by supporting the social interactions, they also increased the networks. The non-family members actually showed loyalty, care towards the family and the organization and other non-family members. They were cohesive teams, and they were there to support each other. They talked of one common goal that everyone was working together or towards, and they also, so these are quotes, so one suggested that they saw themselves as one segment of a bigger part. They also said that they were open for change externally and internally. They were mucking in and doing their part, and they always found someone to help them. So they were highly sociable, leading to informal networks and communications. And some of these networking events that they were organizing within the company, they actually they considered them to be family gatherings. So you can see they had a big sense of family, of them being a family. And that led to the relational dimension, where they actually showed very high regard for the management. Then the organizational change process, the way it was conducted in the organization, was that the decision making, the decision making was top down. The communication was done by the family. The goal was given by the family, and the idea was that the company should operate like a machine. So be very well formalized, the processes, and structured. So that included all the structures within the organization. So they then started to introduce formal interactions. I have to add that the family introduced an external manager and an FCO, a financial chief officer, who also then increased some of the structures and formalized these structures. He came from a different industry, which also made a difference, but that's more detail in my thesis, which then led to the relational dimension being very top down, and that was expressed very strongly by the employees. So after the change process, what the outcome was, and which was also shown in the surveys, is that the family actually had changed their cognitive view of their employees, and they saw staff as being replaceable and seen as a production unit and a cost factor. The strategy was more focused on sustainability and optimization, i.e. the machine, and they valued efficiency and productivity. All the meetings, so the structural dimension was very formal, was organized from top down, and that led to a very distant management in the organization, which then led to the non-family dimensions that for example, the cognitive dimension, where non-family members talked about the sense of family being lost. They commented that everyone tries to offload work onto the other to make sure that their areas run as comfortably as possible. They were suggesting that only financial and economic results counted, and the common goal was lost. Employees needed to look after themselves. So they didn't feel looked after by the employers anymore, and they were actually there to fight their own cause. The structural, so they noticed the lack of socials. They reduced these lack of social interactions, reduced the informal networks and the communication, which also then led, and because of the top-down management and the distant management, which also influenced the relational dimension to mistrust the management. And in the end, actually, they asked for union representation because they didn't feel looked after anymore or sufficiently in the organization. I then changed this. So I then came up with this diagram to actually illustrate what happened in the organization. So you can see the three different dimensions, and you can see A being the critical incident that led to a cognitive change in the family social capital. That this change, this thinking about change, was then passed on to the non-family members in X. So it was one direction going from B to X, so from the family to the non-family, passing on their view of change has to happen and what that change would be. The family then also decided on the structural changes, which is B to C, and then deciding on the structural changes that had to happen, that was then again passed on one-dimensionally to the non-family members to X, so C to X. And what happened, because it was all one-directional, it actually led to low non-family social capital. And this is what happened in the study. What I'm suggesting of doing is to actually make sure that there are feedback loops in the cognitive and in the structural dimension that will then lead to higher non-family social capital. So as you can see in B, so once the family has decided on changes that need to be organizational changes that need to be made in the organization, I'm suggesting that there should be feedback loops from the non-family members to the family in order to actually get a good buy-in as to what change means, where that change would lead and what it means and how it can be conducted. Afterwards, the changes in the structural dimension should again have a feedback loop rather than just being one directional. There should be a feedback loop from C to X and X to C again, and my suggestion is if the cognitive and the structural dimensions are looked after and taken care of, then the relational dimension will actually more or less look after itself, because once the trust has been maintained and the feedback and the communication has been upheld in the first two dimensions, the relational dimension will actually be self-reliant, will be looked after itself. And this is my suggestion in my thesis, and more details obviously and to more extent are in my thesis that you can read hopefully soon in the British Library. So this is me, this is my presentation. Obviously there's much more to it and much more information, but my presentation is already overrunning. So thank you very much for listening, and if you do have any comments, questions, feedback, anything at all, please let me know and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much. And these are the references.